Hello and welcome to Talking Aussie Books, a new weekly podcast shining a spotlight on Australian fiction. My name is Claudine Tinellis. As a writer and avid reader, I love chatting about books. And in this podcast, I'll chat to authors, publishers and readers, giving you, dear listener, insight into what's hot on the Australian fiction scene. So if you're looking for your next book recommendation or just want to know more about Aussie fiction writers, this podcast is for you. Grab yourself a cuppa, sit back and enjoy. She's an international best-selling crime author with a swag of titles and awards to her name. One of only two authors to ever win back-to-back Ned Kelly Awards, her authorial star has been on the rise for some time and doesn't look like slowing down anytime soon. Her latest book, Gathering Dark, is a gritty, clever and compulsive tale about an unlikely group of women who band together battling corrupt police and the Los Angeles criminal underworld to find a missing girl. The result is a thrilling read that made me wonder anew at the inner machinations of a crime writer and what inspires them to write such tales. I am delighted and more than a little excited to welcome Candice Fox to the podcast today. Hi, Candice.
Hi, Claudine. Thanks for having me.
It's my very great pleasure. As I said before we started recording, I had the great pleasure of meeting you for the first time at Storyfest last year, and I think the session was about story setting or something along those lines. And I walked away from that session thinking that crime writers always have the best stories to tell. I could have listened to your anecdotes for hours.
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet. I'm just a collector of weird tales. I have something to say about everything.
I think you do. I've listened to quite a number of your podcasts and interviews, and I'm always struck anew at how interesting a life you must lead. I remember hearing Michael Robotham once saying that every author had to have a few stories up their sleeves to regale audiences with. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I think it's always good to have something. Australian audiences particularly enjoy hearing tales of when you've stuffed it up completely, or just when you've failed, and I've always get the biggest laughs when I'm taking myself off. So I do that a lot. So every time something terrible happens to me, I think, well, at least this is going to make an awesome story. It's good to have personal things to say, because there's nothing worse than thinking, oh, this writer is such an interesting person because their books are so colourful, and then you go meet them and you're like, oh.
I can assure anyone out there listening to you for the very first time on this podcast that is so far from the truth. You are the most colourful person I think I have ever met and listened to.
Oh, thanks.
You've been very open about your unconventional upbringing, the fact that your mother was a serial foster parent, an animal rescuer and collector of eclectic things, and your father a correctional service officer at Sydney's Long Bay Jail. So I wanted to ask you, do you think that these factors sparked your interest in crime stories and a desire to write?
Oh, definitely, yes. The desire to write came first. I think it was just I was trying to escape the chaotic household I grew up in, because I said to my mum once, I wake up in the morning in this house to the sound of kids crying, and I go to sleep at night to the sound of kids crying, like it's just toddlers and kids and babies all the time. And, because they're babies and toddlers are most often removed from their parents because they can't talk, so they can't go along with the parents' story, when they're talking to child services people. My mother fostered 155 kids as I was growing up, and she also filled the house with things she had rescued from the trash, and like mannequins and dolls and she's got weird things hanging from the ceiling and stuff nailed to the walls. Like, it's a real freak show over there. It was really interesting bringing potential boyfriends into the house, both as a child and an adult. I've become one of those writers who can write in chaos and noise and to a time limit, and because I was writing as fast as I possibly could in between my duties as a child. I'd come home from school, and then, before the machine that was feeding, washing, putting kids to bed started, and I started from about 6 p.m, I had time to do whatever I wanted in my room, and that was to use the computer as a portal to go into other universes.
And your mum had an interesting collection of magazines that you used to delve into from time to time.
Yeah, my dad would bring home like police magazines, law enforcement magazines. I don't know if they have them anymore, but they were sort of meant to be sort of corrective services, police, those sorts of people only, because they had gory pictures and, stories about crimes that weren't necessarily palatable to the general public. And so I would read those as a young kid. And my mum caught me reading one once, and I thought, I'm going to be in big trouble. Like, she walked in, I remember, and I was reading it on her bed. I'd snuck into her room because all the best reading material was in her room. Like, she had the Kama Sutra in there and the joy of sex. So when I had, looked at the pictures in those for a while, I was like, oh, what else is
God.
in here, And she had this big stack of these magazines, and they had like autopsy photos and car accident photos and pictures of criminals, victims and stuff. And I just found them fascinating, in a way because they were forbidden, and in another way because they were scary. And I've always enjoyed being scared. As a person, I just enjoy that emotion, particularly when it's like a safe scare,
Yeah.
like I watch a horror movie or something. Like, a couple of times I've put myself in precarious situations and felt the fear, and then later on gone, oh man, that was really stupid. I won't be doing that again,
So, as you're likely aware, crime accounts for, I think, more than a third of all books sold in Australia. What is it about crime, do you think, that appeals to the reading public?
It's high stakes reading. Someone is going to die, or someone has died, or it's life or death, really. It's life or death. I mean, you might read a romance novel and think to yourself, oh, are these two going to get together or not? Or is he cheating on her? Or like that's as high as the stakes go. But we're talking life and death here. Some of my books, like, for example, Hades, I think the death toll for that novel is about 42. Whereas it's also mysteries. Human beings have a puzzle-solving mind. We don't like unanswered questions. We don't like puzzles. We like fitting things together and filling in blank spaces. And so it taps into that part of your brain. And anything else that you want, are these two going to get together? Is he cheating on her? Is this business going to succeed or fail? You can put that in and around crime, because there always is plenty of that stuff that fills those spaces when the detective goes home at night. And he's got nothing to do and he can't work on the case anymore, then that's when you get your love story or whatever it is that you want. So it's got something for everyone. It's a little bit scary. It taps into the puzzle-solving parts of our brains, I think.
I thoroughly enjoyed this new book, Gathering Dark, which was set in Los Angeles. Can you tell me a little bit more about this book and also what inspired you to write it?
Well, Gathering Dark is the story of two women. There's Blair Harbour and Jessica Sanchez. And Blair was a very successful surgeon to the stars, really, or children of the stars, pediatric surgeon, living in Brentwood, living the high life, this kind of thing. And one day she murdered her neighbour. And so she goes to prison for that. And she's been in there for 10 years, and now she's out and trying to live a nice, clean, square life because she's had a child and she wants him back in her life, type of thing. So she's trying to be a good girl, really. And one of the women she met in prison appears one day and says, look, I need your help because my daughter's gone missing. So that's what's happening on one side of the novel. On the other side of the novel, you have Jessica Sanchez. She is an LAPD officer. I was going for a little bit of a Harry Bosch vibe with her. She's kind of grouchy and a stickler and this kind of thing. And she really banged her head against the wall for many years trying to solve this cold case. And she did, succeed in it. And she was very obsessive about this cold case. And so as a thanks, the father of one of the victims has left her a house in Brentwood, a $7 million house. And so she's like, well, should I take this house or not? I mean, I was just doing my job. And she's like, well, it's $7 million. And all her colleagues are like, well, number one, if you take this house, you're out of the LAPD. And number two, if you take this house, like, we're going to hate you forever. Because that's just not the done thing. So anyway, Jessica arrested Blair back in the day for the murder of her neighbour. So the three of them get together to solve a crime, and then they recruit a fourth woman who's just a balls out, crazy, psycho gang lord. So it's the story of four women, four very unconventional women getting together to solve a crime. I think I was probably influenced in writing this by, I certainly was influenced writing this with my relationship with James Patterson, because I've read a lot of James's work, particularly his Women's Murder Club. And he has the four women in the Women's Murder Club, and they're all, good girls. There's a journalist and, a forensic examiner, and then there's Lindsay Boxer and all this kind of thing. I don't really write about good girls, though. All my girls are bad. All my ladies are bad, and all my people are bad. Really, there's no one I can point to in any of my novels where I go, here is a very, very good person who has no flaws and is never selfish and is never underhanded and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, I was trying to do that, and I love writing about women. I used to be very intimidated by the prospect of writing about women back in the day in my first few novels, because I'm not very feminine myself, like traditionally feminine, it's a stereotype. I'm talking of the unfair stereotype of lacy, frilly, let's sit down and do some embroidery and, that kind of woman. I'm more of a, let's build some shelves and let's fire guns and, get in a fight and that I'm that kind of woman. And so I just thought, that's not going to fly in fiction, when in fact it does. It flies really well.
So you were saying that you don't write good girls, you write bad girls. And I guess I saw all of your characters as being flawed, and I think you mentioned that they never really fall squarely really within that good or bad box, I think. From my own reading, neither completely black or white, but rather painted shades of grey. And I wanted to ask you if you thought that was because everyone is capable of doing bad things.
Yes, I do. But I also think that not only doing bad things, but thinking bad things and being selfish and being stupid and I don't know. No one is really 100% pure and good. I mean, I suppose there's people like nuns and stuff like that, but if you're born to be a nun and then you become a nun, some nuns have really troubled histories, and that's why they become nuns. But you know what I mean? It's very hard to point to someone and say, and I like the extremes of that, because I feel like when you think about murder, for some people you just scratch the surface and the capability for murder is right underneath, but for other people you would have to dig down to find that primal animal, violent instinct that would murder, and so everyone's got a different level of how deep that inner monster is. And I'm very interested in what is it that brings that to the surface in people, because some people who kill are just psychopaths, and I have met some very scary psychopaths, and you look at them and you go, okay, your brain does not work properly. But then there are other people who kill and you think, you're just a normal person who just did this thing, and how did you get pushed to that point? In the circumstance, what circumstances brought you to do that? That's just the eternal question that I have, really. What makes a criminal?
Yeah, I think Blair's a good example of that. I mean, she's a convicted murderer, but she claims that she didn't kill her victim in cold blood. And as a result of her time in prison, she questions her essential goodness. And even though she's drawn into a bad environment, it's clear throughout the book that her actions speak of a good person, an essentially good person. So she seems to me to be this symbol for the many good people who get themselves caught up in bad things.
And also, can you make up for it? Can you ever make up for killing someone? And if you've killed someone deliberately and because you just wanted to do it and you did and you hated that person and now they're dead because of you, can you then make up for it in other ways and say, well, look, I am a murderer, okay, and I did that. It was really selfish, but I've done all these other great things. Do they cancel each other out? And I have known serial killers, for example, who would say that. Oh, I know a serial killer who did say that to me, who said, and it's a very twisted logic. He said to me, this was Lawrence Bittaker, who I visited in San Quentin prison. And I went and I visited him because I said, I want to speak to you because basically what you did is the worst thing I've ever heard of. And he said to me, you know what, 33 years of my life, I lived a really good life. I was very friendly and law-abiding and wouldn't hurt a fly. And yes, I murdered all these women. And then for 38 years after that, I was the same again, really good person, law-abiding, lots of friends, that kind of thing. And so on the scale of it, really I haven't been that bad of a person. And then you say, well, that's not a logic that sort of applies in the real world, but how does that logic transfer in a kind of a more normal sense? Like if you accidentally kill someone, and can you make up for it? And can you ever forgive yourself for having done that? And those are the questions I like to play around with in my writing.
I read that you spent 5 hours inside a prison cell with that death row inmate in San Quentin.
Yes.
What was it like to talk to him?
It was very scary. And on the face of it, it was physically scary because I turned up without really much of an idea of how the visit was going to go, and like literally not much of an idea, because they give you a single A4 sheet of paper and it says don't wear these things and don't wear those things, don't wear an underwire bra and don't wear these colours and that kind of thing. And it didn't say anything about what the format of the visit was actually going to be, so I assumed he would be behind glass and there would be a phone, because he's a horribly violent person and very unpredictable. And instead, no, it was what they call a full contact visit. So we were locked in a cage together and we were basically knee to knee. That's how close we were. And they padlocked the door and walked away and left me in there with him. And so physically very scary, but also terrifying in a cold and a more chilling kind of way. Some of his throwaway lines about the girls that he had murdered really indicated to me that he simply had no remorse. And I left thinking to myself, he thinks of these girls that he's killed very much the way that I would think of a mosquito that I smacked on my leg. Like if I looked down and I saw a mosquito, I'd go whap and I'd think, oh, that was a good one. I got it. And then I'd brush it off and then I'd keep going in my life. And imagine if somebody came up to me and said, oh my God, that's a horrific thing that you did. Didn't you think about that mosquito's family and the dreams that it had for the future? And you didn't even think about that before you killed it. And now it's gone forever. And I'd be like, it's a mosquito.
Yeah.
That's what they're there for, is, you just, what are you going on about? And imagine if somebody, like I would say to Lawrence, in 1972 or whatever, you were in this area and this girl was murdered in the same area. And it'd be the same if somebody said to me, in 1995, you went to this restaurant and a mosquito was killed. And I'd be like, I don't freaking know. I don't think about it like that. I don't know. I can't remember. It's not important to me, and it was just like that. What he had done really didn't have an impact on him, on his soul or his being. You think the classic line is, how do you sleep at night? And he's dead now, but he was sleeping fine because it just didn't calculate to him that way. And to me, that's terrifying.
Jessica Sanchez was a particularly interesting character for me. A marginalised cop 2 times over, a woman and a Latino. She had an incredibly tough time just trying to do her job. So I wanted to know, was she based on anyone you had spoken to?
No, I hadn't. I didn't speak to anyone particularly for that role, mainly because by the time I've interviewed someone extensively as an individual, I almost feel like I can't write about them then because it gets out of the realm of fiction and it becomes too real. Like, for example, the John Fishwick in the novel is sort of based on Lawrence, but really not. There are only aspects of Lawrence in that character, just like his narcissism and his vanity and that kind of thing. So I didn't interview anyone specifically for that role, but I think I've had a look at the experiences of being marginalized in other fiction and sort of taken it from there and tried to, I distanced myself from her by making it in a third person as well, because I didn't want to use my voice, because obviously I haven't been marginalized in that way. So I used what materials I had in the cultural sphere already to inform that.
Will we see more of Jessica and Blair in future books, do you think?
Oh, look, you never know, because at the moment you sort of, I write one and then I see how it goes, and we're trying to make the best career moves at the moment, to keep the readership coming in. But I would love to write about them again, because I think there is untapped angst in Blair for working with Jessica, because in this book, Blair has to work with Jessica to solve the crime. And she sort of says, yes, this person arrested me and wrongfully, and they ruined my life, but she's the only cop I know, and she's good at her job, and I need to use her at the moment. And it's only when the case is solved and Blair has a moment to think to herself, I've been working with her this whole time and she's the one who ruined my life, that I think that's where the anger comes. And that's where I was kind of hinting in the end about, she doesn't really know how to feel. And I think that if I wrote about the two of them working together, there's plenty of problematic material there already. And that's what you want when you start a novel. You want to have as many problems as you can. You want to start with the car crash, and then you don't want to have you don't want to ease into the problems, because then the reader gets bored sticking around waiting for things to get hot and heavy.
Well, I certainly thought there was unfinished business there, so I'd be really interested
for
a sequel of that book to come along. There seems to be a strong rescue theme that runs through your books. Now, whether it's Hades, a former crime lord who steps in to raise two orphan kids, or Ted Concaffey, who rescues a mother goose and her goslings, or in this book, where Daly rescues a pigeon and a pocket gopher of all things. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I rescued both of those animals when I was in LA. So in the novel, Daly rescues a pigeon off the side of the 101, I think it is. And I actually did that. My husband and I were driving along the highway. Well, we were sort of inching along the highway because it was all blocked up, as it usually is in LA. And I saw this pigeon and it clearly needed help. And I jumped out of the car with a bag from the shopping center, like a reusable bag, and I grabbed it, and all these people were honking. They're like, don't do that. What are you doing? And I was like, it needs help. It's injured. So that was fun. And I did rescue a gopher. I found a gopher just sitting in someone's driveway, and we were up in the Hollywood Hills. We had a house in the Hollywood Hills. We were pretending to be Bosch, and like on his street up there on Woodrow Wilson and Pacific View, and around that area anyway. And so I found this gopher just sitting in someone's driveway going, I don't feel well. And I said, all right, you're coming with me. And I rescued it. And then I rang all around Los Angeles trying to find somebody who would help me care for it, because there are rescue foundations for squirrels and that kind of thing, but people will poison gophers by the thousand. Like they'll poison 1,000 gophers across a golf course and then just like shovel them all into bags dead. And so I was like, I just have this tiny little one that needs my help, and will you help me help it? And people were like, no, it's a gopher. Like, why would we do that? I like the underdog. I like those animals that nobody else would help, because it's so stupid. Like, I found a kookaburra on the Gladesville Bridge. It was in the gutter on the Gladesville Bridge, looking very sorry for itself. And I put a thing on the internet saying, "Hey, guess what? I rescued this kookaburra." And people were like, "Oh my God, I love kookaburras. Oh my God, that's so great." And I put up one saying, "Oh, I rescued this pigeon." And people were like, "Why did you do that?" And I'm like, they're both birds. Obviously, one is introduced species and is a pest, and one is not. But they're both living creatures who need help, and they're as cute as each other. And I'm always interested when people say, "Oh, this life is worth something and this life is not." And obviously with the mosquito thing, I kill mosquitoes. I do it. I'm not advocating for people to, I'm not like the Mosquito Lovers Foundation president. But there's a line. I think everyone has a line, and they go, everything under this line is killable, and everything above this line is not. And it's very interesting to see where that line is, because for some people, they have no line at all, and for some people, it's like, oh, I step around ants, so I don't walk on ants. Or I've never met anyone who wouldn't kill a cockroach, though.
Oh,
you
yes.
know, like
Neither
that
have
is
I.
No, that's the epitome of killable animals, is a cockroach.
I don't think an interview with you would be complete without mentioning your collaborations with James Patterson. Now, I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier.
Sure.
You've co-written 6 books to date. I believe there's another one due out later this year.
There is, yes.
So can you, I mean, I've heard this story before, but I believe my listeners would love to hear this story about how you met him and how did your collaboration with him come about?
So I knew that he was coming to Australia he was going to promote his book with Candice Fox, and that was Private Sydney. And so he was throwing a cocktail party, and I got an invite, and I was like, oh my God, I've been reading James Patterson since I was a little kid, and all this, they were some of the books that I would sneak into my mum's room and read, because she was a Patterson fan. Yeah. And then, and so I did cheekily say to my publisher, I was at lunch with her, and I said, how does a person get to collaborate with James Patterson? And she said, oh, don't even think about it. There's a whole we have a list of people. And I was like, okay, well, it was worth asking. And so I went to the party and I got all dressed up, and I was going to have my celebrity moment. I'd never met like a famous celebrity author before. And so he comes in and he's got this big entourage of like 20 people all, managing him and all this. And he walked in and I was like, oh, I've got to go over there. Because I thought he's not going to be around for long. He's going to duck in and duck out. He's not going to be with the last crew of 4 people at midnight, drinking. And so I went over there and I said, James, I'm a big fan of yours. I read Kiss the Girls when I was 12 years old and I absolutely loved it. And he said, wow, that's really inappropriate. What were you doing what was your mum doing when you were 12 years old and reading Kiss the Girls? And I said, oh man, don't even get me started on that. We don't have time, type of thing. And we just chatted about writing. I said, I am a writer and I think I write crime, partly because of you. And while we were chatting, my publisher saw us talking, and then I sort of finished chatting to him, and she said, oh, you seem to get on well. And I said, yeah, we did get on well. We just had a little chat. Then she went off and put one of my books, Hades, gift pack for him to take home with some other books in it of other writers. And he just happened to read that one and go, oh, I want to write with her. And so they called me up a couple of weeks later and said, do you want to write with him? And I said, oh, I'll check my calendar, see if I'm busy that week or not. Then, just started from there, and I'm very entrepreneurial because this is my dream job. So I have to keep the wheel spinning as long as I can. I don't want to ever have to do any other kind of job. This is my job. This is my calling. And so I'm very entrepreneurial and ambitious. And so I thought, how do I turn this one book into multiple books? And the answer to that really was forming a relationship with Jim, like a professional relationship in which he sort of will think to himself, well, Candice is good for that. Like Candice is good for writing a book with me that is up to my standard, that is on time, that it's not like there's not argy-bargy between us. There's a little bit of argy-bargy, but not like I'm not a pushover, but I mean, there's not too much of that. I thought, I'm just going to make that type of relationship with him. And that's exactly what I've done. He's great. The bonus of working with him, I mean, it's a very lucrative thing to do and it's great for my career. And you get all the readers and the fans and they all really love the work. But the best bonus is that he's such a delightful person because I can call him up and he's on the phone and we're talking back and forth and he's very funny and very open and listening and he's kind of like an uncle or something is how I think of him. And I never expected that. And that is so lovely to have that in my life.
And through him, you met former President Bill Clinton.
Yes, I did. Yeah. So that was
exciting.
Actually, I know, it was kind of scary though. The first time I ever sat down with Jim by himself, just him and me having lunch, I found that absolutely terrifying because I thought, what if I say something stupid? And I was very nervous because we'd been in the same room together with lots of other people, but, and somebody freaked me out because I said, I'm going to this really important lunch and I don't want to, I might say the wrong thing. And then this chick goes to me, oh, yeah, that happened to me once. I went to a very important lunch with my potential boss and I have a really big gap between my front teeth and I laughed and some chicken flew out of the gap and across the table and it stuck to his face. And I was like, well, great. That makes me feel awesome about meeting James Patterson now. I'm thinking about how that could possibly happen. So then he's like, come and have dinner with me and Bill Clinton. And I was like, oh, great. That's next level again. And he's a big fan of our work and mine and Jim's work together. And he just read 50-50 and he was wanting to know about Liar Liar, what happens in Liar Liar, and I wouldn't tell him. And
you got guts, girl.
Yeah, well, but like he was fine with it, but his Secret Service guys, because all the ex-presidents, they still get all the Secret Service guys, and there were 6 Secret Service guys sitting at a table near our table because they shut this whole restaurant down for us to have dinner.
Of course they did.
And they would just like staring daggers at me, like, just tell him what he wants to know, Like nobody says that they won't, like nobody says no to this guy. And I was like, nah. I said, if you give me your address, I'll send you an advance copy. And I did. I sent it to his house and he sent me like a thank you letter back on this amazing stationery, like this cream. I've still got it. It's like cream card. And if you hold it up to the light, it's got like an embossed sort of thing in it. And it's like gold stamped and it says from the office of William Jefferson Clinton. And,
gosh.
it's really special because I sort of have like paper from Office Works and I printed it out on my Epson printer and, I was like, oh man. Why didn't I use something nicer? Yeah, he put my stationery choices to shame.
But he is a former president.
Yeah, exactly. And someone had typed it, I think, and then he'd handwritten a bit and then signed it.
What a story.
Yeah, it was fun. You don't get to do that very much to say, oh, I met a president, I had dinner with the president or whatever. And that was the same day that I had breakfast with Lawrence at San Quentin. So I went to see Lawrence in the morning, and then when I was done with him, I said, what are you going to do now? He goes, oh, I guess I'm going to go back to my cell. And he said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I've got to go get ready to have dinner with the president type of thing.
What a day.
Yeah, it was huge. At the end of it, I was talking to my mum on the phone because she'd just woken up in Australia and she said, oh my God, tell me everything about it. And I said, I can't. It was too big of a day. I'm so tired now. I have to go.
I have a lot of aspiring writers who listen to this podcast. So I wanted to ask you, if you had 3 tips to offer a budding writer, what would they be?
In terms of your career, if you want to make a career of this, you must have an agent. You simply must, because an agent will be able to help you get the deal in the first place, because if you go into the slush pile, you just won't be considered, seriously, and an agent will get you international deals. So you might get a small amount in Australia, but you'll get a small amount in Israel and a small amount in Poland and a small amount in Russia, and you put all those together and what you have is a big amount. And if you can write a book a year and sell into all those territories, then you can make a career out of it. So my first piece of advice is to get an agent. My second piece of advice is to make sure that your book is hot from the first sentence. And in terms of like hot, I mean like don't try to write a slow burner. Like even a slow burner, there has to be some kind of problem. So Lee Child says a novel is just a question that takes 90,000 words to answer, and that question has to be posed on page 1, like line 1. And so much aspiring author work I read is, page 1 is, the guy wakes up in bed and he looks at his clock and it's 6 a.m. and he goes downstairs and he has breakfast and he leaves the house and blah, 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 blah. And then the problem happens. It's like, no. If you're going to write about a car accident, line 1 needs to be like the brakes screeched and I heard a crunch type of thing. Like the accident needs to be happening now, because the fact is that whoever's reading your work, like a publisher or an editor, an agent, whoever it is taking it seriously, they do not have the time to read about your person getting up in the morning and drinking coffee and all of that. They want to be in the action, page 1, line 1, And the third piece of advice, I think, is to try to thicken your skin as fast as you can. I've been writing for 7 years now. I've been doing this. Like I'm working on my 15th novel for 7 years, but 7 years isn't very long. And people are not gentle with me in terms of my editorial content, and they haven't been gentle for a long time. And I'm edited by 6 different people, and they all edit the one manuscript, and they all, they're not gentle. They don't go, oh, have you considered doing this? And I really like the way you do this, and maybe just a suggestion. They go, no, cut this. Yeah. I don't like this. This is horrible. Take this out, And so the first time anyone ever said to me, I hate this character, he's a jerk, I cried for 3 days. But these days someone says, I hate this character, he's a jerk. I go, okay, right, well, I'll fix it then. Yeah. And the faster you get to that stage, the better you will be to work with as a client, I think.
It's been so much fun chatting to you today, Candice. I wish you the very best with this fabulous new book and the ones that will undoubtedly follow. Thank you so much for joining me on Talking Aussie Books today.
Thanks. It's been so much fun.
Lovely. Now, listeners, head over to my Instagram or Facebook accounts to find out how you could win your very own copy of Gathering Dark, courtesy of the wonderful people at Penguin Random House Australia. Well, that's a wrap, folks. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review on iTunes or drop me a line via my Instagram at Claudine Tinellis or on my webpage, claudinetинellis.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, happy reading.